That thing, is that too small? Max Morgan-Witts, author? Because when you go to Japan, you shake hands and then you pass your visiting card.
Yeah.
That's the way it is in Japan. The Reader's Digest in New York said, well, you're going to Japan, you've got to have a thing. So they gave me this. So I thought, well, that's all right. But on the back is that.
Ooh, what does it say?
I don't know exactly what
Watch
it
out,
says.
this guy will write books about you.
Yes, I believe what it says
Yeah.
is that this chap should be given every help as he is a distinguished guest of our country. Something like that. Okay. It's a good thing I didn't know what it said, otherwise I would have been too embarrassed to give it out. Pauline? Yes? Elliot would like to film other rooms.
Oh gosh, there's such a mess.
Well, the living room, I don't know.
Oh, no, well,
You can sit there.
Yeah, no. Well,
You can just shoot. Yeah, up. I mean, it's not.
well, give me 10 minutes to tidy up.
I was born in Detroit, USA, but we didn't stay there long because there were riots in Detroit. And my parents moved to Winnipeg in Canada, where my father bought a large department store. He bought it on a weekend, and it burnt to the ground on Sunday, and he didn't have it insured. My parents died within 6 months of each other when I was 13, and I was left as an orphan. The first thing I remember was being on a train, and what was in fact happening was that I was sent thousands of miles out to the west to live with an eccentric uncle who lived on a ranch. We had no electricity and no running water. And, you know, in the winter there, it's freezing, like 40 degrees below zero, and then boiling hot in the summer. It's not a pleasant climate.
And the town you lived in?
Vulcan, Alberta. Yes, well, 20 years ago it was still being used as a sort of mock ranch town, because wooden sidewalks and that sort of thing. And when I got older, I moved into Vulcan, and I worked for the local newspaper. Helped with the presses and that sort of thing. Also on Sundays I janitored in a church. Used to drink some of the wine, but I didn't like it much. And I got 25 cents, I remember, a week, which is just enough for a milkshake. I love milkshakes, yeah, still do.
And I heard and saw.
No, you're giving a lot of extra work, you know.
Sorry.
Outside Christchurch's main hospital. Thank you very much indeed. Now,
Is that too bright?
Oh no, it's lovely.
One of those people, a
Getting on
28-year-old,
with
he
it.
has been charged with
She
murder.
has
He
two
will
terrible
appear
children
in
who
our
couldn't care
courthouse
less.
here
I do
in
her shopping
here
and I have to
in
keep
New
bringing
Zealand.
her up. Right, well that's a bit more organised.
In Toronto, I went to an Academy of Radio Arts. We learned about radio. Then got a job on Radio CFCN. I always wanted to see the world, so I saved up enough money, I felt, and bought a ticket to Australia. I got off in Sydney and I got a job. And so I produced radio plays in Sydney for, I don't know, 6 or 8 months. So then I thought I'll move north into India. And I remember going to the railway station in Colombo, and they said, well, what class do you want to go? First class, second class, third class? Well, first class was very inexpensive. So I traveled first class. As we pulled out of the station, I heard knocking at the window. And so I looked over, and there were 2 hands holding it like that. And I thought, blimey, you know, if we go through a tunnel or something like that, this person's going to be killed. So I went across, and I opened the door, of course, and in came this boy, about 16. And he sat cowering in the corner. He couldn't speak a word of English. I couldn't speak any Hindi. But by the time we got off in Hyderabad, we were friends. And he then became my sort of manservant for all my time in India. So it's pretty nice living and having your own manservant. So in come this fellow. He said, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do. The steward to my crew has just broken his arm. Where in India I can find a white man who's ready to leave India in a week? And I said, well, you've just found him. So that was it. I got a job as steward to the crew, which is the lowest man on a cargo ship. The crew on cargo ships are fairly rough characters. So if you're a steward to them, I mean, you make their bed, you serve them food. And that was tough work. Lived in the bowels of the ship. I didn't know any of these people. I think they were Swedish. And my berth, such as it was close to the engine. So it was I was paid off in Norway. And I'd been on the ship, I think it was about 6 weeks or something like that. And I got paid off. And I remember I got something like £3 because I'd spent all my salary on schnapps, on drink, to keep myself going.
It's very, very subtle. It's almost called out in the way that they can drip this into mainstream sort of and bring Sadiq Khan's religion into it implicitly. They know what they're doing. I mean, I ain't talking about it was a compound in the middle of nowhere. This guy spoke English, who was actually he owned the petrol station that was 2 miles down the road. He gave me a house for the night. From the media point of view,
That's as it should
from
be.
the public's point of view, and your perspective as a military person is so powerful. But I keep thinking, I don't know why yesterday, before this even happened, I was thinking a lot.
I had a vague idea that I was heading for England because I couldn't speak French or German or anything. I heard on the grapevine that Granada Television was going to begin and that Sidney Bernstein, who owned Granada Television, got a new Canadian wife. So I thought, aha, I shall play my Canadian card. So I telephoned Granada and built up my Canadian background, and the person at the other end of the line turned out to be my now wife. So I got an interview, and they offered me a job as a trainee director in television. And so I was then a director. I was directing programs, and you can't imagine, I was so busy making programs, I never watched television.
Coronation Street is the story of working people and the city street in which they live. The show has been seen all around the world and has remained in the top viewing ratings throughout its long lifetime. Between 1960 and 1968, street scenes were filmed before a set constructed in a studio, with the house fronts constructed from wood.
Then I went with 2 other chaps as a director on this new serial. They said they were just trying out. We had 12 episodes, Coronation Street.
Hey, you're out of love right now, more than anything in the world. Plate of spaghetti.
And so we had to cast the show, and we were doing the show for Manchester. So we cast it virtually entirely with northern actors. And I think that was part of its success. So I did about 10 of them or something like that, and the show took off. I got an interview with the BBC, and they offered me a job to make film documentaries. Then I did a series of 13 one-hour films on the British Empire. The biggest documentary film series the BBC had ever done at that stage. My budget, I think, in those years, which was many years ago, was £2 million. We filmed all over the world. Actually, it reminds me of a story. When I was at the BBC, one often had to deal with the royal family to get permission for certain filming, especially as I was doing the British Empire series. David was managing director at BBC Television, so I met David frequently at the BBC. But when I decided to leave the BBC and chance my hand at writing books, I went to him and said, I'm leaving. And he then said to me, well, nobody knows yet, but I'm going to be leaving the BBC too. I'm going to be making my animal programs.
What are you doing here now, though, if you're not still writing?
Well, just running a house and paying bills and getting emails from friends and